Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight's conversation is going to focus on the Connect Rwanda Challenge. We are here to understand, with the key implementers who are joining us tonight, the rationale for this campaign, as well as understanding the expected impact and the implementation process. Now, the key stakeholders who are driving this campaign, or challenge as it's known on Twitter, MTN Rwanda and the Ministry of ICT and Innovation. And joining us, I'm going to start with my guest on my left, is the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of ICT and Innovation, Claudette Irere. Thank you for honoring our invitation tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Great. We're also joined by Mitwa Kayemba Ngambi. I hope I pronounced it right.
You did, yeah.
Who is the CEO of MTN Rwanda, just 2 months in the country. Thank you for joining us on The Square tonight.
Really my pleasure.
Great. As always, we are joined by the Square's resident panelists, Charles Haba. Great to have you.
Happy New Year, Diana.
Happy New Year to you too.
And Happy New Year to our guests.
Happy New Year.
Yes, and our viewers as well.
And our viewers as well.
Yes.
My name is Diana PC, host of The Square. We're also usually joined by other resident panelists known as Brenna Namata. She's away at the moment, but I'm sure she's following the show from wherever she is. As we usually do for the last 2 years, so to speak, before we kick off, we're going to have a midweek recap, just things that have caught the attention of the resident panelists. And Charles, I'll start with you. Is there anything you'd like to share, not only just for the week, but the year, 2020?
Well, just when I thought that our roads had gotten the last coat of zebra crossings for the next 5 years. After 3 months, they've changed them again. So
what
that one,
what color are they now?
Now I'm confused.
Yeah.
I think they were red, white. Now there's a shade of yellow because we're hosting the MTN CEO. But that one I've stopped commenting about it. But the one that's really is Donald Trump and the big Iran story. Whoever thought that Qasem Soleiman would be killed inside Iraq by Americans? I think that's a big one.
A big one.
Yeah.
Do you think there's going to be a war or just more sanctions?
Definitely.
You think so?
Definitely.
Maybe it's something we'll probably discuss on The Square.
Yes.
Anyway, so we're here to discuss the Connect Rwanda campaign. And thank you very much once again to our guests for joining us. This is something that went viral on social media, especially Twitter, with people pledging smartphones to connect the unconnected, so to speak. So before the first question to the guests and also to Charles, resident panelist, is to do with the relevance and impact of this campaign. So figures show that Rwanda's smartphone penetration is currently under 20%. And the idea of this campaign is to bridge the digital divide that exists in this country, especially in rural areas. So if you can just tell us, a lot of people are asking, what's the benefit? What are the benefits? Are there some tangible benefits? And I'll start with you, Mitwa. Yeah. From your perspective, what are the key tangible benefits in availing these smartphones to Rwandans, especially vulnerable households, as you both institutions have focused on?
Yeah. No, thanks, Diana, for that. I think maybe leading into the answer to that question, maybe if I can give a bit of background and context under which the Connect Rwanda Challenge was born. We at MTN, over the course of 2019, pretty much towards the end, we're reflecting on how 2019 has ran, and we're thinking about what MTN is going to look like and is going to focus on going into 2020. And we had decided to dedicate the first half of the year on accelerating internet penetration. And therefore, as we usually do, we put up a roadmap with products and services. So for instance, you may have heard of MTN Tuza, which is the first ever non-expiry bundles within Rwanda. We also looked into low-cost smartphone devices, which is potentially going to launch next week. And then we also had a couple of digital financial solution services that were planned or earmarked for the first half of the year. But at the back of our minds, we always knew that the number of people who are going to benefit and enjoy all these services that we're putting out there is always going to be limited by the number of smartphones that are out there. And maybe just to give a bit of context as far as numbers are concerned, in this country, in Rwanda, we have almost 12 million people, 12 million population. And of those 12 million population, we only have 1.7 million people who own and use a smartphone. And interestingly enough, when you go into information from local government, which we acquired through the Ministry of ICT, these 14% penetration of smartphones are only residing in 4% of households today. So there are quite a number of people who are not connected at all, or if they are connected, maybe are not connected with an internet-capable device. So we approached the ministry with what we called quite a radical idea, where we said, if we have 1.7 million customers who have a smartphone today, can we imagine a Rwanda where every single one of those people just bought one smartphone to put in the hands of somebody who didn't have one? This is how the idea came up. So when we approached the ministry, we said, what if we put out the challenge just to the general public and see how many people would be willing to put a smartphone into the hands of those that don't have? And as we matured and developed the idea, we realized this idea is much bigger than just MTN. This is an idea that, or a cause that should be championed by every single person who's in Rwanda, beyond the borders of Rwanda, for as long as they're a friend of Rwanda. So we partnered with the ministry, having put down the idea, and that's where pretty much the idea came from. Now, when you talk benefits of smartphones, I think there are many, but I can maybe zero in on a few. I think the first one is pretty much around access to content and services. And I think Rwanda in the region, because I am African, I come from this region as well, but it's one of those countries that has done a lot of work in terms of trying to digitize a lot of the administrative services, government services, etc. But because we have such a small penetration of smartphones, you find a lot of people are still not enjoying those services that have been digitized. So they still have to leave their households to go into an agent or into a municipal office to try and register for certain services, et cetera, et cetera. But with the increase of smartphone penetration, we can see a culture of more DIY, where people can do things more by themselves. I think beyond that, when we're thinking about this challenge, we're thinking about talking to people in some of these rural areas, and we ask them, we say, what would you do if we gave you a smartphone? And some of them were small-scale farmers. They said, maybe I have heard that there are marketplaces on this internet, where I can maybe put some of my produce that can go beyond just the community in which I currently serve, maybe even in the future going beyond the borders of Rwanda. So we also expect that there'll be some sort of enablement of some of the small-scale commerce that currently exists in some of those areas. I think one of the big ones also is around access of information. Coincidentally, I met the CEO and founder of the Breast Cancer Initiative for East Africa yesterday. And it was Philippa, yeah,
yes,
and it was born out of Rwanda, right? And she has the ambition, obviously, to go beyond Rwanda into East Africa. But she was sharing with me, for instance, how comparing to the Western world, out of 10 women who are diagnosed with cancer, 8% survive in the Western world, 80% of people who are diagnosed with breast cancer survive in the Western world. And a lot of that was put down to awareness and, early detection, things like that. Fast forward into Rwanda, only 30% of people who are diagnosed with breast cancer actually survive. And a lot of the reasons, there are a myriad of reasons, right? But a lot of that is down to late detection of symptoms, things like that. So BCIE, who I met yesterday, they have now developed an app which is purely based in Kinyarwanda, where they have uploaded all this content around images, videos, educating women in villages as to the signs and symptoms or how to early detect when you have, early symptoms of cancer. And she, within this environment, has placed 17 smartphones in 17 villages across Rwanda today. But 17 out of 14,837 is a drop in the ocean. So what happens to all those other villages? So we foresee putting these smartphones in these environments, allowing us to disseminate information a whole lot more easier. And while sometimes smartphones are decoupled from some of the other society problems, I've just talked about a health-related problem, right? And smartphone could always be looked at as a tool to try and alleviate some of the challenges in these environments. I think maybe lastly, one of the benefits that we don't talk about enough within the industry is also the ripple-on effect that increased smartphone penetration would have on the entire ecosystem. I've only been here, like you mentioned, 2 months now, but I've met many local app developers, content creators, whose audience is also limited by the number of people who have smartphones. So the more smartphones are out there that are actively in use, the more people or customers that also these local app developers and content creators have to also challenge themselves to prepare and deliver more innovative solutions. And we also see, for instance, today we have a lot of repair centers for smartphones. But again, for as long as smartphones are not out there, repair centers are not an active business line as well. So I think beyond just the benefit to beneficiaries, I foresee a ripple-on effect to the entire ecosystem as well.
Yeah. Claudette, on behalf of the ministry and also as a stakeholder of MTN Rwanda in driving forward this campaign, answering the same questions, some significant benefits that Mito has not already mentioned.
I think she has pretty much talked about everything, because as she said, when they had this idea, this initiative, they came to us, and surprisingly, well, maybe not surprisingly, this is something that we've had in mind for a while, but we just didn't know how to go about it. We knew that eventually, if we're going to require that all the government services, for instance, are put online at 100% digitization rate, then we will need to put in place ways or mechanisms for citizens to own these devices. And so we were putting up, different schemes, financing schemes that, different groups could actually tap into. But then we had not thought about, what could it look like if we were to now collectively work on ensuring that we put these handsets in the hands of the people. And so numbers, she clearly talked about them. You say 20%, less than 20% penetration. It's actually at 14.6% penetration rate of smartphone. But when you come back to the household now level, it's actually 4%. So. And
because obviously that 14.6% is saturated in certain
this
areas.
Is just subscribers.
Yes,
and here we're talking about both MTN and Airtel subscribers.
Yes.
And then you go back to the household, it's 4%. And you wonder, a country that wants to become a knowledge-based economy, that is pushing all the government services, and also the private sector is pushing services online, and you wonder, how are they going to now start enjoying these services? How are we pushing our innovators, our content creators, and the app creators? How are we pushing them and ensuring that they actually have customers? So there was that gap that was there, and when they came to us, we said, okay, this is a very good initiative, but it's one of the many initiatives, because ultimately it does not take away the fact that if we look at what they're trying to achieve with this campaign, which is, I think the target was 1 million, you still have 2.8 million households that we still need to reach out, and these are just households. You still have 9.6 million subscribers that you still need to reach out and give these phones to. And so we will need to be innovative around how we go about handing these handsets to people. This is just a small contribution, but a significant, and we were calling it earlier a spark. This is just a spark.
It's like a catalyst for many other things to come. Yes. Charlie, before you, I know Charles has a very interesting viewpoint on this campaign, but before you do, we went on the streets and asked a couple of people what they think about the campaign, what they think about, availing smartphones, putting smartphones to people who don't have smartphones. And I'd like us to just view a few clips of some of the people we interviewed regarding their views on the Connect Rwanda campaign.
Hi, my name is Berlin Baizi, and what MTN Rwanda and Ministry of ICT is doing about donating these smartphones, on my side, I think it's a really good thing, because it's going to be helping all the fellow Rwandans. And most areas where you go, you get to find that people are not good at using smartphones. They're still using the old phones, which are not smartphones, and that's a problem. But since MTN Rwanda and Ministry of ICT is going to help out by donating these smartphones, I think it's going to improve on how to use them, and also on how to get to search and get to know about things and what's going on around the world.
My name is Ivani Kamikazi. I'm a citizen of Rwanda. The initiative of giving smartphones to vulnerable people within the country is really a great initiative. It is going to help them to be able to access all these softwares that we are currently using to access the government services. For example, Irembo, they should be able to get all these certificates without having to walk a long journey from their houses to where the offices are. So I find it really, really as a great initiative to support and to contribute to as much as we can, because it is going to benefit us all collectively as Rwandans.
Jewe nitwa Munyamahoro Jean Claude, nkaba ntuye mu murenge wa Kinyinya mu karere ka Gasabo. Ariko ibyerekeranye n'izo smartphone numvise bazaduha mbona zifite akamaro, kuko abantu benshi ahubwo bafite amatsiko yo kuzazibona. Akamaro ka mbere zifite, umuntu ashobora ngo kwivuriza kuri telefone atavuye mu rugo. Ikindi cya kabiri, ashobora guhinga akashakira isoko rye ibyo yahinze atiriwe ava mu rugo, akamenya ahantu habikeneye akoresheje telefone. Ahubwo batinze kuzizana, abantu benshi bazifitiye amatsiko kugira ngo bazikoreshe kuko hari abadafite ubushobozi bwo kuzigurira.
So we have someone there who said, in fact, if anything, this initiative comes late. It should have come even sooner.
Right.
Charles, over to you.
Well, first of all, I need to apologize that I've not yet been connected. So many people have tried to challenge me, and I'm not yet sold. So I will put it up to Mito and Claudette that ensure that by the end of this show,
we must get a pledge.
Yes, you must get a pledge. But I want to go to you, Claudette. Mitwa is a perfect salesperson. She was sent by her board to Rwanda to make MTN money. So you as the government of Rwanda, what strategy do you have to roll out these funds? Are these funds going to go to everybody that MTN wants to get them? Or are the funds going, or you're going to first get the funds and then you have a retreat to decide who gets the funds? What's the strategy for distribution of these funds?
Well, thank you. And yes, she's a very good salesperson. Like I said, that we currently are into Connect Rwanda campaign. I wouldn't say it's not by accident that we're doing this. It's actually something that we've been planning for a while. You know, if you go back to the trajectory that the country has taken to become a digitized nation by 2020, you will see that today, where we are today, if we are calling on to every Rwandan to own a smartphone, it's actually not, it's not by accident. And so we know where the gaps are. We've been doing this exercise for a while, and Mitwa is aware of this, where we wanted to actually get to the core of who are we giving these funds to. Now, we've taken a different approach. You know, it's easy to, and we've seen some people pledging funds and saying, oh, I want the smartphones to go to vulnerable women, you know, in a certain category. But what we're trying to do right now is to look through the data that we have. We have categories of ubudehe. We have data profiles from both our telcos, MTN and Airtel. So what we did, we're able to tell from a household perspective how many household heads have smartphones or do not have smartphones. Currently, we're at a level where we know by cell level, at a cell level, how many households are in that cell that have smartphones or do not have smartphones. And as we get, you know, more people bringing in questions or critiquing how this is going to be done, we actually get ideas on fine-tuning the criteria. The last thing that we want is that the smartphone ends up in the hands of the people that actually have another smartphone. That is one thing that we don't want. Now, so far, we've collected almost 40,000. It's actually 39,000.
Since the pledge began.
Since the pledge. It started mid-December,
yes.
Towards the 20th of December. And
so in less than a month, you have almost 40,000 smartphones that were pledged.
Yes. I think I got my answer there now, because...
but first, wait. You didn't let her finish. No, she has to finish, because she was going to go into the nitty-gritty of the how, because that's what you want, right?
You see, when you allow these civil servants to have a field play, you will not get
you're giving me the platform.
No, but let her finish.
I think I got it.
Yeah.
MTN beat them at the game and started collecting funds and told ICT, the Ministry of ICT, that we are collecting these funds to connect Rwanda.
Right.
Then the Ministry of ICT had a plan to connect Rwanda, but did not know how to approach it. Mm-hmm. So they said, Santa, thank you so much for coming to us in the festive season. You're welcome with both hands.
But at the end of the day...
then at the end of the day, they do not know how to distribute the funds.
No.
Yes.
No.
And
I say no because...
No, she has said that they are now thinking about how to do it.
No, but...
No.
Yeah, she is selling. Yeah. She is selling.
Yeah.
And the government has no plan.
No, but let them answer the question then.
Yeah. No. You saying that the government has no plan is actually really downplaying all the government efforts, right?
I will give you a few more examples about
two or
such
three
initiatives that have gone wrong.
Yeah, 2 or 3 months ago, when the government set up Marathon, right? It wasn't just so we have a very
I didn't
good-looking,
know that government set up
you
Marathon.
know,
That is very good news.
no. So you can always tweak what I say, but you know it was set for that specific purpose.
I thought it was a private entity.
It was so we make sure that the citizens in Rwanda can actually have quality, very, very good
Made in Rwanda phones.
Made in Rwanda quality phones.
So you're saying
right?
government set up Marathon?
Sorry.
What's the share? What's the stake of government in Marathon?
I'm sorry, but that's another, that's a totally off
The
topic.
government said
It's fine,
set
it's
up
fine. That's off topic. That's another topic for another day. But before Charles interrupted Claudette, if you can just give us, and I think you can weigh in on this, Nitua, because that was part of the conversation tonight, right? The implementation process. How do you make sure you get the phones to the right people? And what measures do you have to mitigate, as Charles was saying, abuse? You know, because someone will be like, I don't have a phone, and maybe this and this. So if you can just give us an idea on the implementation process of people getting
I'll chip in with the role that ourselves in the ICT ministry have, and then we can come back to distribution. So when we agreed to embark upon this journey together, we said from an MTN perspective, like you rightly said, so we will put out the campaign. We're responsible for awareness, education around the campaign. We've also volunteered to provide logistics around the collection of pledges, because it's one thing to pledge and it's another thing to collect, right? So for every pledge that has come through, MTN has a responsibility of making sure all those pledges are collected.
So you're in charge of the logistics, following up with people, numbers, pledges on Twitter, so forth and so on, until the 39,000 phones you'll physically have them.
Yes.
That's your role.
Exactly. Okay. And that at that point, and while we're doing this, and just to go back to the point as to whether the ICT ministry has a plan or not, they do, and I've actually physically seen it, where they're looking at it from a perspective of the various segments of households, and we have provided, together with our counterpart within the telco industry, who in this environment has smartphones today. And they're juxtaposing now that information to say household versus smartphone today or not. Then now we're going to go down into the nitty-gritty of how many devices we have collected, and then go into who's eligible for selection. So just to separate what we're doing versus what the ministry is doing, we're collecting up until the point of distribution, and we will accompany them actually in terms of the physical distribution as well.
Yeah, but Charles, I would like you to give a chance for Claudette, because instead of her winning over, she's supposed to win you over. Give her a chance to win you over. So please explain to us.
I hope she can speak on behalf of government as well.
That's why she's here.
And I'll try my best. So basically, what we've been doing is to look at the categories of Ubudehe, like I was saying, looking at who do we have in category 1, 2, 3, 4, and then looking at the data profiles that we get from both the telcos, and then comparing the two. And then you have at the household level who owns a smartphone and who does not own a smartphone. Now, the criteria that we're setting, looking at the numbers that we're able, I just said we have almost 40,000 smartphones today, is to actually get to the level. Today you have 40,000. If you were handed these phones, who would you give them to in the categories that we've already identified? Now, criteria number 1 being, we're not giving you a phone if you already have another smartphone. And so this is the detail that we're into, that we know who at the cell level.
But when you say you don't get you mean a household?
Yes.
Right? So you're not looking at individuals at this point?
No.
So how do you verify this household doesn't have a smartphone? You're working with cell leaders, district leaders?
No. We're still using the data.
Okay.
The data.
So the data from the telcos?
So there's the data from the telcos, the data from the local government LODA, where we have the categories, and each household has a code. So if you have the same code, that means you are in the same household. So we're able to see in one household how many smartphones are in there.
So you're actually using smart data to understand where these phones are going to go.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying.
Exactly. And I think it's from there that we were able to identify through the ministry, of course, that in Rwanda today we have 2.8 million households, but only about 120,000 of them who actually have a smartphone. So the gap is quite huge, and it's very, very clear and visible through the data that is available.
I wish, Diana, your question had been answered by Claudette, because you asked her whether she's working with sector and cell officials. If you asked them whether they are people in terms of priority, it is owning a smartphone. I'm sure that would come bottom on the line. And that is where I see the selfishness of the Ministry of ICT. Because in terms of priority, and I'm going to give you 2 examples.
So wait, but just very quickly,
Yes.
because we need to understand what you're saying here.
Yeah.
And like we keep on saying, this is a solution-oriented show. There's debate, of
Right.
course, but at the end of the day, so you're saying that they're not prioritizing who should get the smartphones,
No.
according to you.
They are not prioritizing, in my opinion, the needs of the people in those different Budehe category. So are you being given an option that do you want a smartphone, or do you want 2 goats, or do you want 5 square meters of land?
We're actually going to
or a
get to
hoe?
those tweets. Yes, yes.
Or do you prefer a hoe, or do you want, and that's the biggest problem I have. It's how impactful is this going to be? And I want to take Mito out of this conversation because her job is to sell. She's going to increase her network connectivity. The penetration of telecoms is going to be great. Everyone is going to make money along the way. But how impactful is it going to be for that person down there? What's the price of the cheapest smartphone that you're putting on the market?
$50?
$50.
Right.
$50 is about 45,000 francs today. Do you guys know that the government of Rwanda has a deficit in its billions in terms of the mutuelle de santé bills? We cannot afford to take our households to hospital. People there cannot afford to pay medical bills, which are as little as 9,000 francs a year in, I think, category 3. And here we are saying that we want to give them a phone that has a lifespan of probably 2 years, and I'm sure the data will not be free, and we want to give them 45,000 franc phones? Come on, guys, government, and back to government. Mito, I want to take you out of this conversation a little bit.
No, but
Yes.
no, I disagree with that. I feel you have absolutely every right,
Yes.
not just as, getting to the bottom line and money, because you're also involved
Of
with
course.
communities
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
So Claudine, and this also applies to you,
Yeah.
just to categorically state that.
Yeah.
So-
I think maybe before you remove me from the conversation, I will say one thing. I'm not insensitive to the challenges that exist in rural Africa. Being African, I
Yes.
get it, and I know. But I also know there is no country's challenges that can or should be solved sequentially. I don't believe so. And I'm sure when Claudette speaks, there are a lot of government initiatives that are running around education, around health. If you even talk MDS as an example, mutual de santé. I mean, MTN, we came out towards the end of last year. They were contributing 2.5% of our revenue. Obviously, it was a government initiative that we complied with. But I think there are a lot of initiatives that are being rolled out to tackle the various societal problems that we have. I do feel, though, that if we wait to tackle education and then health and, by the time we're raising our heads to think about, oh, let's now digitize this country, we'll be light years away. And, I mentioned it earlier, I also do think the smartphone needs to be looked at slightly differently from the way we're looking at it in terms of it being a luxury. It could be seen as a tool that can alleviate some of the challenges that we have today. That's what I was going to contribute before Claudette, you come in.
And I think you've already talked about everything I was going to say. I don't think as a government, we're only going to just focus on the challenges that we have. We're a government that also is looking at developing itself. And if we're going to talk about development, you're not only going to look at mutuelle de santé, you're not only going to look at, hens and goats that were supposed to go to the citizens, you also look at what other tools can I give to these citizens for them to be able to actually empower themselves economically. And so, to me, it's a question of development. If we were to go with that mindset, we would not be where we are as a country. We would not have Kigali Arena. We would not have a convention center. Right. We would not even have MTN, so to speak, because we would not have invested in the infrastructure that we're currently enjoying as citizens for us to be able to communicate. And so I don't think one excludes the other. We are a country, and we look at these things. It's a horizontal kind of line for us. You cannot just say this one is more important. Yes, it's important, but there's also this one. It's equally important as well.
I just also want to add my 2 cents in the sense that to respond to Charles, you know, there's a story, I think His Excellency, the President said some time back, whereby in the early 2000s or late 90s, you know, they were thinking of investing in a 4-star hotel. This is like less than a decade after the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. And a lot of, you know, experts and donors kept on saying, look, why? First, make sure, you know, you focus on education and health and this. And it's like, yes, we're doing that. That's never going to stop.
Right.
But at the end of the day, can't we have a sort of visionary, you know, collective psyche in saying, why can't we dream or think of almost impossible? Because you will always get bogged down, you know, by these issues.
Yeah.
And it was that sort of thinking that led to the first 4-star, was it 5-star? Charles would know. Hotel Intercontinental. But a lot of the development community, donor community, if you wish, were completely against it, saying that, you know, you'd rather focus your monies on this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
And we said, we're not going to stop focusing on education. We're not going to stop focusing on security, on health, on so forth and so on. But at the same time, in tandem, let's also kind of balance out and kind of reach for the stars, you know. And we had Intercontinental that then became Serena. Serena, you know, very many hotels, because that's what attracted investment. So, Charles, I think...
No, I do not want to take the shine off that ball.
No, but let me finish. No, let me finish. Because what I'm getting, and we're allowed to debate on this.
Yes,
just because I'm on the square doesn't mean I want to agree with Charles. And Charles really agrees with myself.
Right.
But I think from what you're saying about the ministry, in saying they're being selfish or not going to the ground and asking people in different levels of the categories, what do you want? Do you think, of course they're not going to choose a smartphone, but that's government's role to say, look, let's catalyze something.
Let's impose on you a smartphone.
No, not let's impose, but let's, you know, let's suggest this and let's kind of drive this, and then we'll see the gains later, because we're going to be working in tandem with all the other issues that you have, but at the same time, making this a relevant tool to these communities.
No, just to massage Claudette's ego a little bit. If tomorrow...
You shouldn't take him seriously with his the way he talks.
If tomorrow you decided that all health officers, all agronomes, as they are called, all civil, from local administration from the level of Mudugudu upwards, all heads of the little associations that are trading centers and what have you, because I'll take a wild guess, maybe about 50% of them have smartphones. If it is those business and social influencers who have a wider impact on the economy, on the community, are the ones who are being targeted, I would say you got this right. Because after all, not only do they have a bigger impact on their community, and I like the fact that as every day, you say it in your own words, that every day goes on, you're fine-tuning. You're fine-tuning this. I'll invoice you for my idea if it's implemented. Not only does that happen, but they're also the kind of people who have the ability to buy her airtime. So I think it's the communication around the approach is lacking. And that lack of communication is the one that hasn't gotten people like us hooked. Because the word on the street is that we are giving poor people smartphones.
And I would like to actually respond to that. Looking at our categories, you know, looking at the categories of Ubudehe that we're looking into. The first category, if you look at how we plan on distributing, we're not really saying we're distributing to them. We're actually looking at the segment that is about to graduate. This is a segment that most likely has a student or someone else that is actually going to be able to use this phone. But on top of that, we know giving you a phone is not going to solve all your problems, right? And so we are collectively planning other activities around giving you. There's a whole sensitization.
Actually, while you're on it, let's go to the next segment of the conversation. Yeah. Yes, you're giving the smartphone. I
just want to say something else. I am privy to information that there's a lot more that goes to do with a smartphone. In my business, we did quite a bit of site acquisition for telecoms. So I know where there are masts and where there are no masts. I know how difficult it is to service a mast in a very rural area, and the infrastructure and the logistics that goes with it. So as you're doing that exercise, I hope you're putting that into consideration, that there are areas where a car just cannot pass.
And I think this is why this
and I think this is why there's no power.
I think this is why I think this is why there are two key stakeholders, MTN and government. But just going back to the next part of the conversation, can you just give us a rundown briefly? We don't have, of course, time to dissect it, but a rundown in terms of the literacy programs. You're going to give smartphones to people who may have never used them before. What are some of the programs or things in the pipeline you have in terms of training these people on how to use smartphones, and also giving them ideas on their benefits as well?
So I'll start, and Lito will complement. We've been doing this for a while now. We, as a ministry, came up with what we call National Digital Talent Policy. And talent policy. And we segmented, I would say, the population into different layers. So there's the base of the population where we have around 5 million citizens. These are the people that just need basic literacy, basic digital literacy. And for that, we've created a program that we call Digital Ambassadors Program. So we train young people, and then we send them, we deploy them in the villages, in the cells, where we currently have 110 of these young people deployed, but the plan is to have 2,148, we call them digital ambassadors, deployed to these cell levels. Now,
across the country?
Across the country. So they are equipped, they have curriculum, they know exactly what to do, and they know the segments of the
And they've been trained by the ministry and its stakeholders?
And its stakeholders as well. And so this is just one little part that we're doing in terms of that. But now, coming back to the campaign itself, we know that if we hand you the phone today, you probably know you will need an account created, you will need all these things. So together with MTN and other partners, we're actually creating a curriculum specific to this campaign that goes with how do you use a smartphone. And prior to handing these devices, there will be training where we call on the beneficiaries and actually train them, and before we hand them these devices. And now, because MTN has been generous enough to not only give you a phone, to help with this campaign, but they will, on top of the smartphone that you will get, they will hand out SIM cards with bundles of the data, I think 1 GB throughout the first 3 or 4 months. We will ride on that wave and put some of the content that we plan in Kenya, Rwanda, that we plan to use right on that, ensure that these people are using that content on digital platforms as well. And so this is part of this. But this is just the beginning. We will look at...
What's the time frame for giving smartphones to people in Rwanda? The campaign, you said, is like a 3-4 month campaign. Yeah. But in general, and you said it's something you've been planning, but what's the overall timeline, like whereby we can have this discussion again on the square with Charles, and the actual tangible, results and outcomes.
Yeah.
Do you have timelines?
And I'm challenged and I've participated.
Oh, but that's going to happen today. Yeah.
So by the end of this conversation, what we've agreed, internally is that as soon as we receive these devices, we actually go out and distribute them, because there's no point of us just keeping them. We will go out and hand them.
So you're going to distribute 39,000?
What is the 39,000? These are pledges.
Oh, they are pledges.
So yes,
the
next phase. Yes, the next phase is
assuming you walked out of this studio
and someone hands me 39,000.
Yes.
So now the next thing is to start distributing
to people whom you don't know.
No, but we already know.
But why are you refusing? Why are you refusing to understand that they're using smart data? They know the places, they know the people.
I actually don't understand why you say we don't know.
But she kept saying that they are going through with the categories and they're still trying to define it.
No. But what she said is like they know these people, they know these communities, they know this household.
I told you,
they're using data from
at the cell level.
They're using them at the cell level.
This is exactly what is going to happen.
I think you're being bullheaded. You just want to be bought into the idea.
This is exactly what is going to happen, Diana.
Yeah.
We had 2 serious backfires.
Please
The
don't take
most
time on this.
frequent-
With
Yeah, the most
smartphones,
recent-
yeah, let's not
No, no, the
distract.
most recent
Let's
was
not
the
distract.
tractors.
Uh-huh.
The government of Rwanda spent a lot of money on tractors, and they were brought and dumped somewhere in the Eastern Province with no plan. Fast forward, after several years of decaying and deteriorating, they were auctioned.
So you're afraid this might happen?
Then came the cows, the Frisian cows or exotic breed cows.
So
So
I think
things
very
that-
quickly,
these things
I
that
think,
the initiatives that the government makes,
Yeah.
especially when they are bamboozled by private sector that has an
but Charles,
economic gain.
I think you need to also
Yes.
give the benefit of the doubt. I know you're talking about the Jirinha program that didn't
And
go...
the truck, and the
And the
tractors.
trucks, yes, cows were given to people who really didn't need the cows. So this is what we're talking about. What are the measures to mitigate abuse where people get these phones?
But,
and you explained it in detail.
Yeah.
We don't have time. We need to move. We need to move because we also want to read some of the tweets that we have from our Twitter feed based on this campaign, this challenge. And the first tweet we have is from Jack Hodari, and I'll give it to you to read, to answer, sorry.
Okay.
And he says, this campaign having been started and led by MTN Rwanda leaves many unanswered questions. How sure are we that this isn't a way of getting an edge of a competition or a marketing tool?
Yeah.
It would have been less complicated if this campaign was started and led, I think, only by Rwanda ICT Ministry of...
Very well.
Yeah. So before we go to our next tweet, Mitwa, what do you have to say?
Yeah, and I think Charles kind of mentioned as well that
Yes.
Mitwa is a very good salesperson, you know,
Yes.
put in Rwanda by her board. But I think, like I mentioned earlier, the issue around smartphone penetration is much bigger than MTN. And MTN, though it's seen as a corporate entity, I can promise you we're only maybe 3 foreigners. Everybody else is Rwandan. So we care about what happens in this country. And it's for that reason that we didn't go on our own. We could have ran this as a promotion like we usually do and called it MTN Connect Rwanda or Connect Rwanda to MTN. We didn't do that. We saw it extremely important to engage with the ICT ministry as well as other stakeholders, see how we can really make a serious impact in this country. What MTN has done is said we will, with every smartphone that is pledged, put in a free SIM card, and we're also going to offer free data for the first 3 months. And on top of that, for the first 1 year, we're going to give discounted prices to try and address the challenges around affordability. But nowhere in our communique are we saying we are locking these devices to the MTN network. We are confident. We're confident, of course, in the network that we have. It's wide, it's reliable. We're confident in the products and services that we have as well. But if someone so chooses down the line to try another operator, no one is restricting them from doing that. So in as much as we expect connections to come through this, I think for us, the societal and economic impact is so much more of a focus than gaining on market share.
On market share.
Yeah.
Our next tweet, more or less, he's asking a question, but you answered it. And this next tweet is from Jean-Paul. And Jean-Paul states that, thank you, Rwanda Square, for hosting the show. I believe Connect Rwanda initiative is good for our country to enable all Rwandans to be connected to the world via internet. We would be glad if MTN Rwanda could provide free discounted 4G MTN SIM cards to users. Before we go to our next tweet, I think...
Yeah, that's done and done.
That's done and done.
Yeah, done and done.
Discounted, and you said for
yes,
the first year.
So just to repeat, so every phone that we're collecting would be distributed with a free MTN SIM card for those who don't have SIMs at all. If they have an existing SIM card, it will be just a phone delivered. Free data for the first 3 months, but on top of that, discounted data pricing for the first 1 year.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next tweet is from Hirgwa, and you more or less answered this, Claudette. Maybe you can give a quick summary after this. Could you kindly elucidate more on the criteria that will be taken into account in distributing those smartphones to the beneficiaries? What is the role of each part, MTN Rwanda and Rwanda ICT into implementation? Of course, he tweeted this before the show. I think you've answered that. Is there something you'd like to add, Claudette?
I think I've already answered that. It's we're looking at we're using data. We're not looking at you know what everyone knows because of the fact that we're afraid that we might get into the same issues that Charles was mentioning. And we know, we're very aware of the challenges these previous campaigns and challenges have had, and we're trying not to repeat the same mistake. And so being the Ministry of ICT, we need to lead by example. So we're using big data. And
you're aggregating that data from the telcos.
So we have the telcos, they've really profiled, they know their customers, the KYC is very, very relevant. Know your customer.
Yes.
And then we have the data from, you know, the Ministry of Local Government. Now we're just comparing the two, and we're able to tell, yes, at the household level, actually, this is a house that could use this phone.
So you already have a roadmap of the households?
Yes.
Okay.
We already do.
Next tweet is from Etienne, and Etienne says, thank you, MTN Rwanda, for taking the lead of Connect Rwanda initiative. How are you encouraging partners to not pledge only smartphone devices, but also support to address smartphone literacy in the long and short run? This is a major challenge to bring tech to the unconnected people.
Yeah.
So other than people pledging phones, what are you doing with regards to smartphone literacy?
Yeah, and I think Piers touched upon some of the education and sensitization initiatives that are going to run as part of the distribution process. But I think maybe just to complement what she mentioned that the ministry has had for a long time now digital ambassadors whose curriculum is going to be updated with some of the content of the Connect Rwanda campaign to make sure that the correct information is getting to them. But I think beyond that, we've been also positively overwhelmed by the feedback from people who are pledging not only smartphones, so we don't necessarily have to go out and solicit this support from local content creators or local app developers. Some have come out and said, I would like to create a website for Connect Rwanda, which coincidentally is what we're using now. And we foresee, as part of this Connect Rwanda challenge over the subsequent weeks, us now galvanizing content creators, application developers to now try and create use cases for these actual smartphones that we're putting in the hands of people.
But you also have plans in terms of literacy, like going into these communities and people not only pledging,
absolutely,
but inviting people to come and share smartphone literacy.
Absolutely. So as part of the distribution plan, we have said at least 4 days before the actual distribution happens, we would then be on ground between ourselves and the ministry, educating people on this smartphone that is to come. So we're telling them, this is what a smartphone looks like. This is what you can do with a smartphone. Anybody who doesn't have email addresses, can we help you create them? Another initiative is to try and preload some of the applications on these devices so that by the time they're reaching the hands of people, they're not now having to download these applications by themselves. And through that week, we'll be there with them until the point where the device is in their hands. As MTN, obviously, we have activation plans that run throughout the year, which will also make sure that information that was passed on 6 months ago is refreshed as and when we're in those regions. What we've also offered the ministry is that we'll be able to detect usage of these devices. So if we see of the 40,000 as an example, 20,000 of them have dropped their usage or are simply falling off, we'll be able to make outbound calls into them to say, is everything okay? Is there a challenge that you're facing? Can we help you with anything? So those are the kind of things that are part of the distribution plan.
And then using the digital ambassadors that are stationed at the cell level.
So using pre-existing structures from the ministry.
To now follow up on why you're not using your phone, what's the problem, so then we're able to actually mitigate some of these risks.
Yeah.
And yes, some of the partners have already pledged not only building websites, but actually pledging towards increasing the number of digital ambassadors, for instance,
because the digital ambassadors are the ones who spread the literacy on how to use them.
Yes.
The next tweet echoes what Charles was saying earlier on. And this tweet is from Romeo. And Romeo's tweet, if we can have it on the screen, says that one phone can literally buy 4 goats or 10 hens, which can economically improve welfare of a household. Smartphones aren't that needed for people in Titirotiambere, which is category 1. The social welfare categories we're talking about, as they require internet to effectively be made use of. You've talked to Charles about it. What do you have to say to Romeo very quickly before we go to the next tweet?
Again, I think as a government, we have so many priorities. You cannot only look at, one priority and just say, as a government, this is what we're only going to focus on. We cannot be sequential about how you address your challenges. You need to look at them. Yes, you need to look at them in tandem, like you said earlier, and be able to address them. And then another thing is that we need to stop looking at a phone as a luxurious tool, but it's actually a tool that it's a utility. It's something anyone could use. So the minute we stop looking at it as an elite tool for the elite people, then we will start seeing it as a tool that anyone can actually own.
I think the last tweet for today is from Richard, and Richard Niwanshuti says that the idea is super, but we may need to think about the initiative broadly and think about the implementation arrangement. And he starts by saying choice of beneficiaries, hand-holding the users to make sure it's not a phone just for calling, put quick surface apps to make them solutions, not just phones. I think this is what both our guests have been saying regarding
So,
the implementation process?
I think she alluded to it when she said we're making sure that we preload the funds that we're handing out with existing applications that are made in Rwanda to ensure that there's maximum usage, but also ensuring that we train and sensitize people ahead of them owning the fund. And so I think this addresses the question.
I think maybe again to Claudette, just two things, and me too. This time I want to loop you in.
But Charles, can we just read this tweet? Because this can be your closing. Just the last tweet. And the last tweet is from Sylvie, and Sylvie tells us that access to information is a human right. A phone can link a rural citizen to immense opportunities, such markets. Very important for a Rwandan woman. She can report gender-based violence privately to Rwanda Investigative Bureau, can pay her family mutuelle, track her medical record, and child milestones. So these are people also tying this to societal necessities. But carry on. And if this can be your closing.
Two things, yes. I'm happy to combine that with my closing remarks. Two things, and from a policy level and from a business level.
Right.
Imagine in our urban setting, we have a myriad of dropped calls, and internet is a nightmare. Across all the forums that we're always complaining about how internet is not only expensive but unreliable. We are aware, we have spoken on the square, Diana, before about the wars with the bulk provider and the wars that you guys have with your big boys. So imagine we have those problems in the urban setting. Now what about the rural setting? I wish you guys luck. That's number one. Number two is predominantly around the government of Rwanda, and please do not get us wrong when we critique these things, Claudette. We appreciate that your problems are your problems. Your problems are not the Ministry of Health's problems or the Ministry of Justice's problems, and that is why everybody is supposed to row their own boat.
But they're all government problems.
Yeah, and the biggest problem we have that we always sing on the square, if you watch this show, is around government coordination.
And anyway,
yes.
But I think
yes,
yeah.
Yes, I'm closing on that. That if at the end of this year we have an appraisal and say how much money was spent on this Connect Rwanda program, vis-a-vis the impact we have had on reducing our malnutrition levels in the country and so on and so forth. I would like to look at that comparison.
I think if I can pick on what Charles is saying, I think the idea is what people would like to see is a sort of government coordination between this initiative to deal with issues faced, let's say, in agriculture and farming, or in health and so forth and so on. But I think that's the idea of the smartphone.
Yes.
It's
Can
supposed
I congratulate me too on something?
Yes.
If you've, yeah, it's just...
No, but Charles, no,
yes.
no. I want you to give your closing remarks, please, and Nita, your closing remarks.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think you alluded on, I would call it coverage, right? And we're very much aware of the issue of coverage, and we, last year I think it was a bit even, it wasn't even the best, the experience wasn't the best because of the different upgrades that the two telcos were making on their networks. And we will continue to work as much as we can to ensure that this is actually addressed. As we speak, I know that more than 30 towers, if I may call them, they have been set just so they look at areas where the signal is not the best,
And to deal with issues of the previous year,
yes,
for instance.
the previous, and even going forward, we've identified, we know exactly where these signal issues are, and we will keep addressing them. The thing is, when you look at this thing, it's not putting out this infrastructure of internet connectivity and everything. It's not a one-off kind of thing. It's something that you continuously do, This is currently, yes.
I'd like us to, sorry to cut you short, but the thing is we're running out of time. I think it needs a three-part conversation.
It does.
Nita, I'd like to give you closing remarks.
Maybe just in closing, just to emphasize a couple of things. I think one, Connect Rwanda is one and not the only initiatives. There are plenty of initiatives, even addressing smartphone penetration itself. This is one of many. let alone addressing issues around network coverage, quality, all of that. With the Ministry of ICT and Rura closing last year, for instance, we put up 30 sites in areas where there was no connectivity before. And you're going to see another 30 from MTN coming in before the end of June. So there are a lot of initiatives running to address all the connectivity-related challenges. But before I do close, maybe I'll just take the opportunity to, if we're going to have a very fruitful conversation when you're appraising this challenge and campaign, just to appeal to you and also to everybody who's watching, this campaign is going to only be as successful as we, as citizens, make it. It is not going to be MTN or the government or anybody else who's coming to save us on this one. It's citizen-driven. It's literally every single person, hand on the money, trying to contribute to this initiative. If we're aiming to collect 1 million devices, it's not only MTN or the government that's going to do that. And by the way...
And we're not actually using the government money.
At all, at all. This is individuals who are taking their hard-earned money and saying, I want to make a difference in my country, and therefore I will... And therefore, I would now put a smartphone in somebody's hands. Yeah. So my appeal to everybody is, if we really want to come back on the square and have a chat about a success story, everybody must pledge. Come on to Twitter, Facebook, call us, whatever the case may be, everybody must pledge.
Thank you very much. We come to the end of the show. Definitely, this is a show that requires part 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'd like to thank our guests, Claudette, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of ICT and Innovation.
Pledge.
And Mitwa, thank you very much on behalf of MTN. And just to let you know, the Square already pledged 5 phones.
Fantastic.
We pledged this 5 weeks ago. We're going to get Charles on board, and maybe next time we'll pledge more phones. Charles, always a pleasure having you, rocking the boat, as always. Thank you to our viewers for watching. Thank you to our partners, Uzi Collections and Bourbon Coffee. Keep the conversation going on Twitter using hashtag #TheSquareRW. Thank you. Have a good night, and see you again next week.